Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted my network and growing network. There's this ripple effect of just connections that I'm building. One of those silver linings of the pandemic, if you can find one. So these are great leads that'll be introducing me to these books. I want to know how the book has impacted them, what stood out, whether it's impacted their business, their work, their life, whatever it may be. All those lives intersect. And in this series, I cover three categories of books that they're sharing with me that I haven't read, a book that we've both read, whether specifically for the episode or in our past lives. And then the third category is when I speak to the authors and or publishers about the books that they've put out there and they want to share the message of that book with this audience. So for this particular episode, my guest is Heidi Mitro. And Heidi is the visionary and CEO of When You Lead Coaching and Consulting. With an infectious passion for empowering leaders and professionals, she's a driving force, redefining the landscape of leadership from the inside out. When you lead isn't just your run of the mill company, it's a transformative experience that unlocks each individual's natural and unique potential, allowing them to become the unrivaled gurus of their own lives. I love that.
Mm.
Heidi firmly believes that when high achievers and passionate souls possess the mindset, tool set, and skill set of strengths-based leadership, the ripple effect, is felt throughout their lives, careers, and communities. Nestled in a cozy Midwestern town, Heidi lives with her partner, their three children, and two pooches. When she's not creating from her home studio, you might find her browsing a nearby indie bookstore, dreaming over a backyard bonfire, or participating in a local community building events. As a lifelong learner, you never know what Heidi is brewing up next. And the way that I met, why are you laughing, Heidi? We're
I
talking about
just
you.
it's so interesting to hear your bio back and it's
Yeah,
so
it
true. I'm
really,
like I totally would go, you want to go to a bookstore right now? Let's go. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
we have
yeah.
a bonfire planned. I'm like that's very me. I just
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting to hear
And
back.
when anybody's reading your bio,
Uh,
it's weird. You don't know where to look. You're looking
I
up, you're looking
know.
around. You don't want to look too proud, but
I'm super
um,
proud. I'm like, heck yeah,
absolutely,
man, show me.
absolutely,
It's so
getting it
good.
done.
I love it.
So the way that Heidi and I met is that we're co-authors on a book that previously launched. It just recently launched, actually,
Hmm.
in early July. And that book is The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Successful Soul Professional, 22 Powerful Growth Strategies for Upleveling Your Soul-Aligned Business. I got to know her a little bit during the writing process. There were meetings here and there with all the authors, but I got to really know her when the publisher of the book hosted a podcast. It was just me and Heidi on the podcast, and it's one of those moments where you really connect with somebody that has that similar energy. You
Hmm.
don't need to have the same, necessarily the same beliefs or want the same things. I think, and I bring that up only because it was almost like you find somebody from your tribe. And I think
Mm.
people, when they hear that, they may think that it's somebody that agrees with everything you have to say, or you agree with everything they have to say. For me, it's come down to energy. So Heidi's one of those people. And luckily, she introduced me to her partner, Mike, because she saw similarities in the way that we function, the way we work, what we want out of life, business, our family, etc. So I
Hmm.
had a great conversation with him. So again, these growing connections of people that just have that same kind of energy. And I'll share a link to that podcast. I think it's awesome just to see that energy bouncing around of what is possible
Hmm.
when the right people touch base and get together. So Heidi, thank you again for joining me on screen.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. We talked about this before we started recording that I think we could have just bounced from that interview right into this interview and it would be probably a different version of this conversation, but I also want to point out that you wrote chapter 11 and I wrote chapter 22 and 11s are very synchronistic for me.
Ah,
My birthday's 11/11. So,
is it really?
yeah, so I was like, okay, I loved that I was chapter 22. And then when we were on, and it was just the two of us, I thought that was really unusual and wonderful. And that conversation, I had goosebumps like the whole time. And that's how I know I'm in the right room, is there's that
Yeah.
physiology that shows up.
Yeah, because there was the opportunity for it to be more of the authors coming on to talk about their chapters.
Hmm.
Coincidentally, it was just the two of us that were able to make that time slot.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's just something about, and I mentioned it a couple minutes ago, where you may be connected with people on LinkedIn. You may see what they post, what they share, what they write, whatever it may be. But there's something about getting into a conversation like that where it just seemed like everybody we worked with on this book is just, I don't know, there's something about being professional, and
Mm.
then professional and going for whatever you can accomplish, like
Yeah.
lighting the world on fire, changing that world. And I found that through this podcast and in that
Mm.
book with you, my co-authors.
Well, and I think it's that purpose, but I also think it's you can't teach someone to be genuine. Like
Hmm.
you can teach professionalism, but I really don't think you can teach people to be genuine. I think that comes with confidence, and we talk about the word confidence in my community where you break it down where fid is the root word of confidence, which means to trust. And I love that because it ties into part of what we're going to talk about with money and this book. But think of that in fiduciary terms, right? Like, do you trust yourself with
Trust.
money? Do you trust yourself with your purpose? Do you trust yourself with your own passion? And I do trust myself. And I think that when you trust yourself, it's easier to be genuine. It's
Mm.
easier to be in a room and be okay if people don't like you. It's easier to show up to calls and you don't even know what you're going to talk about, right? Where you're
Oh yeah.
platinum
Yeah.
networking, right? Where you show up as yourself. I
Yeah.
think people really can, there's an attunement that happens when someone shows up with being genuine and authenticity. And I think you've got that too.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, that's an amazing point. When the right people are together, even just the right person.
Mm.
Um, you're right, because I think we've all been networking so long that we can get a sense for somebody that's just kind of there to get business. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
everybody, and let me preface that by saying everybody here, everybody doing this, everybody that's on LinkedIn wants to draw attention to themselves, their work, their passion, their values, their
Of
message.
course.
Let's just get that out of the way. That's why we're all doing it. But you can tell when it's kind of just for profits, revenue, clients, and when it's kind of like you said, it has that genuine foundation. I think
Mm-hmm.
the more you network, you get a sense for who's who and what's what out there.
And I think that it's the people that are genuinely connecting. I don't have data for this, but I think they are making more money in the long run. I think the investment in people, I think I can draw links between networking events, like who introduced me to this networking event, and we are having relationships for years. And you're creating a web, it is a network, but it's such a web. And the people in my web right now are genuine. They want to make a profit for sure. Like that's the point of
Of
business that we
course.
get to be transparent about.
Yeah.
But if I will never sacrifice profit for my passion or purpose. My physiology will not allow it. If I am not
Yeah.
attuned to my
That's a great
values,
point.
my
That's a great
body
point.
is like Heidi Marie. It pulls the middle name on me and says
Oh, it
like
uses the middle name.
you got to shift, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a driving force for me is what I'll regret, what I'll
Mm,
feel if I do something that doesn't feel comfortable, if I don't do something that I felt that I should have.
right.
Like I
Your
even if
body
nobody
knows.
knows, I know that yeah, your body knows.
Yes.
You you feel it in your bones, you just don't feel right. So it's important to listen to that. I think most people have that, but they don't listen to those little voices and those little senses.
Or they don't have the language for it. I mean, that's
Hmm,
really part of what we talk
that's
about
true.
inside of When You Lead. It's one thing to have a philosophy, which I love, but
Hmm.
there's also physiology involved. And if you don't know how to name what you're feeling, or you have been conditioned that what you're feeling doesn't matter, or what you're feeling isn't relevant, of course you're not going to listen to it. You don't have the language and you don't have the tools. So that's why we want to go three for three. Let's give you the philosophy, let's give you the tools, but you also have to have the skill set, and that includes the body.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing because I've talked about it on here before where, in school we got information. We got information we had to regurgitate on tests, quizzes, papers, and whatnot, presentations, and this and that. But very rarely did we get most of what you're talking about. Like being in
True
tune,
story.
understanding it. It's just, yeah. Thinking back, I mean, I went to school for a bachelor's, two master's degrees, and I learned a lot. I met great people, met great professors, but the biggest lessons that I've learned in just everything that you've mentioned is just kind of being curious, learning,
Mm-hmm.
reading, meeting the right people. I've grown exponentially just from talking to the guests on this show, and I think
Mm,
when yours comes out, I think this is going to be maybe episode 66.
cool.
Um, but that's where I've done most of my learning is, yeah, you can put that information that we learned into practice, but you're kind of also tying in the sensation of who you are, like what your values are, goes into it. It's just very interesting that you don't learn that when you're young. There isn't even, there may be now, but something like you said that kind of highlights listening to your body, listening to yourself, and what it is you want out of the world, out of the work, out of your business, whatever it may be.
And that dissonance is really powerful. So, when you, just for example, using your school experience, where you go and you learn the things that you need to learn in order to get the degree, that's one element. And then you're like, wait a second, there's this whole other way of connection and accumulating and learning, but there's dissonance between the two.
Yeah.
And that dissonance is really powerful because that's where we get to shift systems. Because if the system isn't working, if the structures are not supportive of the ultimate goal, we need to update. And that's really, I think, where leadership, we talk about updating leadership all the time. That's the mission of our company, is to update leadership, because old, outdated leadership says this is the way you need to do it. And the way that I've learned to do leadership is much more innate to who I am. It's much more instinctual. It's much
Yes.
more connection and community based.
Yeah.
And there's dissonance, which is why I have a company. It's like something isn't right here. And
Absolutely.
whenever something isn't right here shows up, that's an opportunity for a system update.
Absolutely. Yeah. My work, like yours, is very tied into who the person is. I don't
Hmm.
see any disconnection between who the person is at work and at home.
Same.
There is, there is,
There's
but that,
nuance.
but there's, yes, there is new, perfect word. I love that word, nuance.
Hmm.
So it's not, you don't take off one hat when you step into work, put on an, it's not Mr. Rogers kind of thing. You know what I mean? So,
Or
so
maybe
much of
it
who you are.
is.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I mean, say, different looks, same person kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
We could do a whole
Um,
episode on Fred.
I don't know. But all right. So first question, we got into
Yeah.
all of that. We dove into all of that. But first question that I want to clarify with this audience is, who are you today? Can you provide an overview of the work that you do with your clients?
Who I am today. So I am the oldest I've ever been, and I am also the youngest I will ever be. So there's always a paradox with with showing up. And who I am today, this is the best version, the deepest version of me that I've ever been. And that really is my intention, is to always be going deeper. We talk a lot in business, like we have to go to the next level and we have to, new heights. And sometimes we're detaching from ourselves then. So we flip that inside of When You Lead to say, is this the deepest version? Is this the fullest version? We call it the new next level, which is to go deeper and more connected and more curious. So the business side of what I do, and again, there is no difference from my personal to my professional to my community life. There is a drumbeat, there is a current of massive curiosity. And I really do recognize that I'm in such a unique position of privilege to be able to make change. And even talking to you, like, we're not even in the same freaking time zone, right? Like, this is crazy that we can utilize technology like this. So we are an online business, but we do in-person events as well. But we're absolutely on fire for updating leadership. And leadership is outdated. It just is. There's so many structures in our country, specifically of the US, that are outdated, and leadership is one of them. And I'm hell bent on updating it. That's really what we're doing inside the company.
So what does that look like, Heidi? Like what kind of programs? Is it
Yep.
one-on-one? Is it group? Like what kind of things can people find, like if they went to your company website?
Yep. So right now it started with coaching for me. So I was working one on one with high achieving women. And then it was like, okay, we need community here. And full disclosure, I was never going to have a group program. I thought groups of women were an absolute liability. It was like, I envisioned middle school when I thought of women's programs. And what ended up happening is these really high achievers and deep feelers were also looking for community. And so I was listening to them, I was listening to that nudge, and I started a group coaching program, an inner circle mastermind. And these women are leaders. They didn't necessarily identify with that word leader, but they were. So we were redefining leadership. Like, what does it actually mean? So these are, six-figure women in VP positions. Some of them were business owners. but they were like, I love what you're teaching me. Can you teach my team? Can you come in and teach the leadership of the company that I'm working for? And that's really where the consulting came in. So right now we offer a mastermind that's just for women. And now we're doing consulting with updated leadership. So I teach the LEAD method, LEAD, which is my own method.
Hmm.
And we support that by using the Colby A index. That's an index that we use. It's a strength centered based assessment. It's been phenomenally successful. And right now we are working on a community. So this will be an online community space. We have I have a disappointment class that's going to be coming out in a few weeks where we are on a mission for people to break up with disappointment. 1,000 women a month is what we're going for women to break up with disappointment, and then to serve 1,000 leaders in this community over the next 2 years. That's our goal. And the community will be open to men and women. So we're growing, we're expanding our team. Our team is, I'm just so proud to be on this team. So
Yeah, I like the mix of that you do work with women, but then at the same time mixing men and women. And granted, yes, speaking, coaching, most oftentimes you come into an organization and it is the organization, so it's diversity of every kind.
exactly.
But yeah, there is I think you and I had talked about it on Laura's podcast, just about, or maybe afterwards, after we stopped recording, about um, the impact of men and what they're going through, what they're experiencing, how their role is changing. So I like that you have the experience with just the women in your courses, and that's the plan. But at the same time, again, I know that mixing them is what we do every day in group coaching and
Yep.
whatnot, but there's something about paying particular attention to that dynamic between the two.
And I think the mastermind for women, I had flirted with having it open to sensitive men, and we talked about that before we started recording. Like, sensitive is being aware of your surroundings. You can sense things through your physicality. You are hyper aware at times, right? We're like, we have that superpower. And I flirted with having the inner circle be co-ed, but there really is something about women being in a space and being powerful and like filling up their entire space and then going out and leading in co-ed spaces. And
Hmm.
so it's been interesting on the consulting side to work with co-ed teams. And sometimes I do work with just the women of the team because they need it, that we've been conditioned in a different way. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of reprogramming and a lot of healing that gets to happen. So
Yeah.
there's benefit to both.
Yeah. And just because I've worked with people and I've spoken to people out here that it was just kind of like exclusively women, which is great, phenomenal. Ally, I'm all for it,
For sure.
absolutely. But I think there is a lot to be said for going from that environment and just that insight that you can provide, going from that environment that's all women to navigating an environment, setting an environment, facilitating something for both, because
Yeah.
you have that hyper awareness. So I love that. Was that all, Heidi? Did I
Yep.
miss anything? Okay.
Yeah, we've got a podcast launching too in the next couple of months. It's called the Updated Leadership Podcast, and really, it's my love letter to high achievers to
Mm.
say there is a different way to do this, and all of those inner knowings, all of those nudges matter. So it's all recorded. The first season is recorded, and we're going to be rolling that out along with this disappointment class in the
I love that. When
next
you said that
month.
before, disappointment class, I'm like, wait, did she say disappointment
Oh,
class?
for sure.
But
Because
I mean,
can I talk to you about that
go
for a
ahead, go
moment?
ahead. Absolutely. Anything
Okay.
you want to talk about, bring it up.
This is what I hear from women all the time, whether they are parents, whether they are leaders, whether they're CEOs of their own company. I just don't want people to be disappointed. Or they say, I am so disappointed in this person. Why am I continually disappointed? And I've done interviews of previous clients and I'm like, what was one of the most impactful things that you learned from me? And this is not in my curriculum ordinarily. This is like it usually comes up somewhere, in the middle of our program, and then I just teach it because I have a whole method for how you break up with disappointment. And so when I kept hearing, like, God, that disappointment method was so powerful, I was like, really? That's amazing. Okay, let's teach it. So we started talking about what we were going to name this class. And I was like, let's just tell them what it is. Let's not try to be clever. Let's just say, hey, this is, if you are disappointed chronically or you are afraid to disappoint people, you need to take this class. It was so fun to record. the first 20 minutes is like why you need to break up with 20 or why you need to break up with disappointment, and the last 20 minutes is like how. So it's really, I'm proud of it. I'm excited to launch it, and it works because when
Yeah.
you break up with disappointment, you actually have more freedom. You're liberating the energy that you need to go light the world on fire, to your point.
Yeah.
Disappointment is an energy suck.
Yeah, I haven't thought about disappointment much. Like
You
it's
will
just not one
now.
of those. Yeah, exactly. Now I'm just gonna see it everywhere. Now I'm just gonna use that word everywhere. But no, I think maybe just because I'm on cruise control of like business, work, fatherhood, um, and to me, I always go back to it, Maslow's hierarchy, where for me, as long as like my kids and family are safe, shelter, food, all like the do or die stuff.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know. There are
Disappointment,
moments
I think,
where
for women is a bigger deal.
yeah, yeah, true,
And it's
absolutely.
geared, the class is geared for women. My husband Mike, my partner Mike, has said, yeah, that's interesting. When I talk about disappointment for women, it's like, oh my God, where it's like manna from heaven.
But I'm trying to think like I don't hear that word or use that word often. But when you said, you don't want to let people down, I do feel that
Yeah.
sensation every once in a while. And listen, I don't say it to hijack it away from the women in your group.
No, not at all.
I'm always just trying to get in touch with what somebody's saying. Like, okay, that's curious. Like, what does that feel like? But
It's
I can
another phrase that
imagine.
women will say, or it's all the memes that are like, oh, fill your own cup first. I remember I taught a class on that as well, and I said to Mike, has anyone ever told you to fill your own cup first? And he's like, what did you say? I'm supposed to fill my own cup first? And I had seen like three memes, on Instagram that day of that language. And so we were talking about the messaging between men and women leaders. And so not only are we supposed to, don't be too forceful, don't be too aggressive, make sure everybody's fine, fill your own cup first. There's a lot of conflicting messaging. And disappointment for me is one of those keystones. So we talk about what are the keystones. It's one thing to talk about the high level things that people need to take
Yeah.
care of, but disappointment is a foundational piece for a lot of women leaders. So I want
Yeah,
you to
when you
break up with
talk
it.
like yeah, when you talk about like genders and marriage and spouses and kids, I mean, that's like it's not even a different podcast episode. That's a different podcast. That's just,
I'd listen to it.
just cuz it's insane for me just thinking what I thought marriage was going to be, kids was going to be, and then the reality of it and how it makes you feel. But again, we'll launch
So
that
the title of
podcast at
that
a
podcast, because this is literally what we talk about, is it's not what I thought it was going to be.
yeah.
And so there's not the congruence between what's actually happening and what your expectations are. And arguing with reality is a really tough way to
Mm,
live. It just is.
oof. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can. It that
It's
does
true.
resonate. Yeah, it does resonate. Again, that could be a whole different.
We'll do a
Um,
series, John. We'll do like a three part.
yeah,
We'll do a three part.
absolutely. I'm down
I'm
for
in.
it. Pick the topics. We'll do a 3-part series. I'll publish it on my platform. You publish
I'm
it on
in.
yours.
I love
We'll
it. I'm writing
drag
it
Mike
down.
in.
He'll
We'll
do it
drag
too.
Mike in. Absolutely. So Heidi, next question is always to get a sense of who you are, or why you are who you are. Um, what did your journey into your profession look like? What was your childhood like in terms of what did you study? Whether it was influenced by parents, by educators, by mentors, what was that path to get you to where you are now? What did that look like in the beginning? Even if obviously no one ever knows where they're going to end up exactly. But what were
Right.
those first couple steps like?
I grew up in the Midwest, so grew up with, my parents were married. My dad was a beloved teacher, still is coaching three sports in his 70s. Like he's kind of a staple in the community that I grew up in. My mom has always been the drumbeat of our home. She took care of it all. She actually started her own business in her 60s. So I have really great role models when it comes to my parents. And I always felt a little off. I always felt like, wait a minute, is this how we're supposed to do this? Like I had a lot of questions. So an example of that, I went to Catholic grade school, and I thought, well, heck, man, I'm going to be a priest. Like that's for me. You get to be on stage, you get to give speeches every Sunday. You're talking to people about their faith. Like I just thought being a priest would be the coolest job ever until I was told no. Like that's not available to you because you're a girl. And it was one
Mm.
of my first times I registered like, oh, there's a limitation here and there's nothing that I can do about why. And it was kind of that feeling of being powerless, but also like, you guys are missing out. I would kick ass at being a priest. I know you can't like, say that
I
to a
can
priest,
envision
but
it. I can envision it.
but I was spicy in that way where it was like, well, of course you can do it. Of course you should lead. Of course, I had the phrase of leaders are born, they are not made, and they are made just like anything else through hard work, right? Like this whole, I was a leader as a little kid, but that was really conditioned out when I realized the way that women leaders were talked about, the way they were treated. And so growing up, there was a sense that I was meant for leadership, but I was going to have to figure out how to reconcile what conditioning said and what my inner
Mm.
knowing said. So it was a lot of pushing back. It was a lot of questioning the status quo. I've called myself kind of an unintentional problem child. I wasn't contrarian to be disrespectful. I really was like, well, why do we do it like that? If this isn't working, if we can look at results and go, this doesn't actually work. This doesn't work for everyone. This isn't equitable. This isn't letting everybody have a seat at a round table. I don't need to sit at the head of a table, but I sure as hell would like a chair at it.
Mhm.
And so it was a lot of questioning. And in college, I studied philosophy, which was such a relief. I have a BS in philosophy, as my dad says. Partly true. But it was my place to ask questions. I had a lot of them. And I knew that something wasn't congruent for me because I would experience a lot of anxious feelings and a lot of depression feelings. So anxiety and depression became my barometer of whether or not I was going, it was kind of like you're getting warmer or colder.
Mhm.
And when I was going away from myself, away from my inner knowing, depression feelings and anxious feelings would present themselves. And so I've really learned to listen to that. It's not the most fun way that I learn, but it's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
effective once I know what I'm looking for. So the business side of what I did, I was in corporate after college, super successful in sales, and hated it. So depressed, so anxious. And I ended up actually going back to massage therapy school. That was not a real popular choice with my family, but it was a very natural next step in retrospect, where it was like, of course, I had the mind stuff, I had all the questions, I wanted to know how things worked. Now we're going to the body. And I had a really successful massage therapy practice for about 13 years. But the women that I was working with, their bodies would say one thing and their minds would say another. And I was like, how do I serve you? So I started looking for other tools, and coaching was one of those tools. And so I gradually shifted away from body work to coaching. Thank God, because COVID hit right after I began my business. So it was this trial by fire. And it's just organically grown and shifted. So that's the long Cliff's Notes version, but that is the Cliff's Notes.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. So for you, does it make sense from your childhood that this is where you ended up?
It's interesting, yes. I think if you would have told like 7-year-old Heidi, this is what I would be doing,
Yeah.
she'd be like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, duh. If you were to tell my 14 or 15-year-old or 20-year-old self, she'd be like, absolutely not. It's not even possible. So
Oh,
I
okay. Because
consult my,
she thought it wasn't possible.
she thought it wasn't possible. Partly, I mean, the internet was like not existing, but it would have been like, yeah, you're going to be on the Jetsons. You know? But
Yeah.
I, but I
Yeah.
think she was also, those versions of me had a lot of anxious feelings and a lot of depressed feelings. And so the idea that you could actually get paid to do something that you love and to be in a community where like I have goosebumps as I'm saying it. I am the luckiest chick on the planet. I am so fortunate to work with the people that I work with, to be able to do podcasts like this, to be able to meet people like you, to write chapters of books. Like I am so fortunate. It doesn't mean it doesn't come without difficulty, but I'm no longer looking at the difficulty as though there's something wrong with me. I'm looking at that
Mm.
difficulty as there's something to learn here, and there's community to meet here. So things have shifted a lot.
Okay, a few questions.
Yep.
So at what point did you realize that the depressive feelings, the anxiety, that those feelings were indicators? At what point did you learn to utilize those as
hmm
tools to help you kind of navigate your life, your work, whatever it is that you kind of desired?
So I was diagnosed with depression when I was like 14 or 15. And the at that time, that was pretty revolutionary in and of itself to get a diagnosis, to go to therapy, to be medicated. That was still very new. And but I was told you will have depression for the rest of your life. This you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. This will be something that you just have to live with. And if you have children, they will have it as well. Like that was the at 14, that's a lot to lay on someone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I also remember being in therapy going, I just really don't understand why people are so shallow. Like, this is a lot where I did a lot of my status quo questioning,
Hmm.
where it was like, people are asking me how I am, but they're not sitting with me long enough for me to actually tell them. They don't really care. And that was highly stressful for me that I wasn't able to connect or be seen in an accurate way, right? Like I wanted someone to talk to me about things that were deep.
Hmm.
And I had incredibly instrumental teachers who did. The teachers from my middle school, I have a couple of writing teachers and some sociology or teachers that were so impactful. And I did a lot of community service around depression and anxiety when I was in my 20s. I wrote for some columns, I organized with some organizations. But the message still was, you're going to have this forever. And I was in my 20s and my mom was watching television. And this woman, what was her name even? I'll have to think of it. She had a course called Attacking Anxiety and Depression. And I was like, okay. And this is like back when it was like a tape set. You know, you listen to a cassette freaking tape.
I think you and I are close to the same
I'm
age. Yeah.
43. Yeah.
That's I am
So
44. Yeah.
what was her name? Lucinda Bassett. I don't know why I remember that now, but I listened to those tapes. She talked about meditation. She talked about nutrition. And I was like, oh, so a Diet Coke and a cigarette's not a good breakfast? Like, I don't know why I'm depressed. So I learned about nutrition. I learned about movement, but I also learned about listening to that inner voice.
Hmm.
And my inner voice is really lovely. She's darling, and I really enjoy hanging out with her. But it was probably the decade between 20 and 30 where I started to experiment with meditation. I started to experiment with food, with sleep, with actually doing something that I love to do. 20 to 30 was probably as developmentally massive as 0 to 10, where you're going from
Yeah,
birth to,
absolutely.
fifth grade. 20 to 30 was that shift for me. And I still have feelings that are anxious and depression feelings, but I haven't been on medication in gosh, 20 years. I course correct in the moment. So I have a big toolkit. So if I'm feeling this way, if I'm feeling chaos, we were talking about that word before we recorded, or I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling depression feelings, it's like lean in. What are
Hmm.
you communicating to me? What is it that I need to know? How do I need to shift? And when I work with women and they hear that for the first time, they're like, "Yeah, whatever." I'm like, "No, but let's lean in.
Yeah.
What are your anxious feelings? If they were sitting on a couch next to you, what would they say?" And then it's like, you need to quit your job. You need to leave your partner. You need to, there are these big messages sometimes that come in. It's
Yeah.
like, tell me more about that. And then we're off to the races.
Yeah. God, you just said so much.
I know.
And I don't mean that in a bad
No,
way. The developmental periods, that was
mm,
awesome just because I feel like I've developed and grown more in the last 2 years
same.
during COVID. And because of this podcast, I've
Mm,
developed more than any other decade.
same.
Um,
Yeah, and we're just
um,
at the beginning of 40s, man. Like, think about 40 to 50 for us. Man,
well,
that's
I mean,
exciting.
what's great is I had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me that found a study somewhere. He was giving a speech, and I think he found a study somewhere that said like the most productive years, I guess maybe professional or your livelihood, whatever, were like your 60s were
Mm-hmm.
top, your 70s were second, and then
Mm.
your third place was I think 40s. I
That's
think.
awesome. I love to know that.
Yeah, something to that effect. But it was mind blowing to think that in your 60s and 70s. But it makes sense. I mean, especially if you're a lifelong learner, it just doesn't stop. Which I mentioned in your bio, I consider myself.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other thing you mentioned? Talking about course correcting in the moment.
Yeah.
I had mental health issues during the pandemic, anxiety, and then that got me thinking about anxiety. And I had read books about anxiety even before that happened. Um, but it got me thinking of, yeah, what is its purpose? You know,
Right.
I'm of the
There's so much
mindset that
intelligence within it.
exactly, yeah, like I'm of the
Mm-hmm.
mindset that we're we've been around for millennia and millennia. Um, back millennia ago, all the way back when we it was fight or flight, like
Yep.
you had to protect yourself, you had to do all that stuff. In the last 15 years, more or less, is like the when social media has picked up. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the world that we're in now, never mind the internet in the mid 90s when most of us started playing around with it, but like
Right.
social media, you feel like you're around the world like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're so connected, you're so tuned in, uh, that our minds are just not meant for this kind of world. You know
No,
what I
not
mean?
yet.
Like,
Yeah, in 100 years, maybe we'll have one more synapse
yeah,
that can
yeah,
do it, and by then, who knows what's going to happen?
yeah. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
most of the things that we had those anxieties or fears about way back when, right? Primal, were about survival. We're about
Right.
your food. We're about your clothes. We're about your shelter. We're about your safety. For the most part, most of us don't have to deal with that. But all that anxiety, all that kind of tension is programmed into us. You've,
Mm-hmm.
you've mentioned that word, program. So for me, that got me thinking about all that stuff. So I love when you talk about when you feel those sensations. What does that mean?
Yes, there's nourishment in there, there's energy
Hmm.
there, there's intelligence. And for
I think it's
me,
almost like we mistranslate it.
oh,
You go with the first
100%.
impulse. My body doesn't feel right. And I'm not speaking for everybody that has
I
these feelings at
understand.
all. But you get those impulses. You're like, oh my God, something's wrong. And if you have people that say something's wrong with you, but I
Right?
don't
That's
know.
hard to
Like,
overcome.
yeah, it is just that programming. But I'm following you only because I've realized like I do tap into that. So when I
Mm-hmm.
have those anxious feelings, it's okay. What is it that I need? Do I need
Yes.
like spiritual? Do I need emotional? Do I need physical? What is it that's
Yes.
missing right now, that I have to tune into?
And sometimes
So
nothing is missing. I think that sometimes the
that's the
it's
worst
like
part
there's
sometimes.
so much. Maybe there's nothing missing. Maybe it's I think we get, appropriately so focused on accumulating, and sometimes it's a matter of reflection, you
Yeah,
know.
and I don't know about you, how you do, because I think sometimes like the hardest moments have been when there is nothing to do, like everything's taken care of, and you can sit down and relax.
Yeah,
And
what's that?
sometimes that's like the worst.
But I think that that's physiology, and so I really genuinely believe that leaders need to know how their bodies work. And so I'm incredibly grateful. I remember sitting in massage class and we were doing, anatomy and physiology and reflexology and I mean pathology, all of the things where you're like, "Oh God, I shouldn't work on anyone. I'm going to kill everyone on my table. Like this is not safe." But I remember learning about the endocrine system and the nervous system, and I was like, "Why is this not taught? Why are we not aware of how our bodies are absolute
Yeah.
magic?" But if you know, so when for depression feelings to show up, typically what's happening is I'm out of my purpose. I've forgotten that I am purpose, right? I'm trying to
I love
prove
that.
myself.
Love that.
And or I'm out of integrity, I'm out of wholeness with a value of mine. Or I've crossed my boundaries. Those are three areas where I'm able to go, okay, if these feelings are showing up, if I'm out of congruence with myself, where is it? And it's usually within purpose, values, or boundaries. And then I can go, okay, have I been overextending? Has someone come into my bubble? When was the last time I had alone time? When did I eat last? Is this a foundational hit? Is somebody in my space who we are not in alignment on a core value of mine? Or have I forgotten that I am purpose and I don't have to prove anything? So those are three categories that can be helpful when you're in those spaces. And don't do it alone. That's a trap. Depression feelings, anxious feelings, that don't do that alone.
Yeah, I found what's helped me is talking to you all.
Same.
You know, because you'd be surprised how often it's amazing, a testament to my guests, all of you, that open up about your challenges, whatever they may be in your experience, hurdles that you've hit. So a lot of people have opened up. Therapy has come up a lot
For sure.
in these conversations, which is amazing. But I just
We have
always
a
feel
rule
like
of whoever gets the most help wins. Because I'm nothing if I'm not competitive. I still like to win, man. But whoever gets the most support wins. So who's on your team?
yeah,
Who's your therapist? Who's your chiropractor? Who's your massage therapist? Who's your, acupuncturist? And like, let's talk about it. And it's
yeah.
fun when women, especially in this mastermind, where they're like, okay, I can't make it to this. I've got my therapy appointment. And everybody's like, woo, yeah, go get that
Yeah,
therapy.
you hear that more and more. You know,
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, it used to be like, should I mention therapy? And now therapy comes up in a sentence and no one flinches. The speaker doesn't flinch. It's just like,
It's
yeah, I was talking
beautiful.
about therapy. Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, it is amazing because you get that realization. You find that realization that you're not the only one going through that. And sometimes I
Yeah,
think that has been the trickiest step to get over, or hurdle
right.
to get over, is just that sensation that it's something that I'm doing wrong. It's something I'm not doing right. Um, but
And
when you
if you
hear that,
really go into that, there's intelligence there too. What am I doing wrong?
Mhm. Yeah.
And by wrong, then we get to deepen that definition of like, where are you? So I like to have the middle path of Buddhism. So it's like right action, right speech, right? Like, right. So where do you need to course correct? Something
Mm.
is in fact wrong. Not because you are wrong, but because something is wrong. So if I can remember
Yes.
that, like, I am right, I am, this is an attunement. My body is so smart. My system is so intelligent that it's going to freak me the hell out when I am
Mm.
not going in the right way.
Yeah.
And if, as long as I know the first thing that's going to show up is you're doing something wrong, like there's something wrong with you, and I can go, wait, what's the truer version of this accusation? Something's wrong, honey. Listen, slow it down. That's
Yeah.
been helpful for me anyway. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's been a
No, absolutely. Listening to your body, listening to yourself. It's amazing how much time, years we spend looking for the answer outside of ourselves.
I
And then all of
know.
a sudden it's like, oh, it's inside.
Ugh.
Like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
success moving up and out of yourself, or, that piece of, okay, now let me go to a deeper level and learn more about myself. It's amazing how much the studying has turned around from outward to inward for me.
Oh, same.
Um, and yeah, just I think what you've spoken about in terms of physiology and all that needs to be taught, and not for a test, not for reps
Right.
in the gym, not because certain metrics or whatever, but because of what that helps you with, that how in tune it keeps you. Because I have a deep appreciation now for working out. Before, it may have been something when you're younger, maybe a vanity of
For
looking
sure.
good and this and that, but now it takes a different turn,
Yeah,
mostly
movement
because
for
my
me,
doctor said my numbers aren't looking so good. But
but those are indicators, right?
with exactly indication, the anxiety, just it's amazing. And it's like this experiment of changing what you eat, how often you get outside, who you
Mm-hmm.
keep yourself around, who
Mm-hmm.
you tolerate, what you tolerate. You know what I mean? So
I
it's
do.
trial and error. So even if it's not perfect, even if you don't get it right every single day, just the fact that you can experiment, if you will, with your needs, is just try different things. Don't just stay where you are because you're afraid of what's out there.
Well, and I think that to your point around movement, I mean, that's what women are conditioned. Like, there's only certain body types that are celebrated. There's only certain ages that women are allowed to be. And there, a lot of women that I work with come to me, and they do have a lot of trauma, and that is the true definition of a traumatic experience, where who you are is wrong, and there's no way you're going to make it right. That's one definition. But we talk about moving now as a way to have access to your own brilliance. I move truly because I have so many thoughts all the time. I get very excited. I have a lot of innovative tendencies, and movement helps me focus.
Hmm.
Movement helps me to feel myself more accurately, especially if anxious feelings and depression feelings are showing up. That is a whole, it's a lot of energy, and moving some of that energy out through movement,
Yeah,
whether it's
yeah,
lifting or walking, it matters. Movement is not to be skinny and whatever. Now movement is a part of the, it's part of what I get to do to take care of this gift I've been given.
yeah. I think I referred to that. I don't know, in episodes in maybe episode 30s somewhere about my anxiety in terms of that it was energy that I just needed to
Yeah.
get out of me. That
Yes, you
I'm
can't
just
outthink it.
Yeah, you can't outthink it. You can't just sit there and wait till it goes away. That I had to burn it off. Like when you have a great workout, maybe you're stressed out. You go in, you work out, and yes, there's the physiology of it, the endorphins and whatnot.
Yep.
But just thinking of it anecdotally, just looking at it on the surface, you feel like shit. You go into a gym, you really get your heart rate up, you really get up a good sweat. You walk out, and I've been in situations where I had that anxiety, like it was really bad, and I'd go in there, and you walk out, and you're just like, I can't even remember what that sensation felt like.
Yeah. And that's where those set points matter, where, and we just believe in, the compound effect of your actions, the compound effect of who you're hanging out with. We have a rule where we don't go more than 2 days without like really intentional movement. So that's been really helpful to keep me on track, where it's like, ah, crap, it's been since Monday. But you have a system in place that supports it. So don't go more than 2 days without actually moving intentionally. That's been a helpful tool in our house.
Yeah, that's a good one because I think at like the 3 or 4 day mark, my head starts feeling foggy. I feel
No.
groggy. Things don't
I
feel right,
know.
and I'm like, I'm looking out there. I'm like, what could possibly be wrong? And it's like right here, like you haven't worked out in a few
Truly.
days, you know. So
But the
burning that
intention
off
matters,
helps.
right? Like if you're working out to be whatever physically, that's different. If you're working out for your mental capacity, you're working out because your purpose is so huge that you need
Mm,
to show up in a different body for it. Like that's different.
yeah, it is different. I don't know what they do in gym now. I don't know how they approach it. I don't know what kind of messaging they use, but there's a big difference between, okay, what's your BMI, like how many reps can you do,
I
like,
know.
passive, what did you get in time on your mile. Those are all good things, but there's got to be that knowledge with it of, okay, aside from a metric, this is what it can do for you, this is what it can do for your mind, like this is what it can do for your performance, not even on the field, not even
Right.
at the chin-up bar, sit-ups, none of that, but performance in other areas. Because that's the other thing, when you're releasing that great energy, whether it's this, because I'm much better after one of these.
Same.
Like I'm an introvert and people don't believe that. And on here, I
Same.
don't shut the hell up. But when I stand up from a great conversation here, I'm a completely different person because I've burned off that good energy.
Same.
I'm
And I
not sitting
think
there
there's a,
stewing because I think you have
yes.
energy and you're not sitting there stewing where it turns into sour energy. You're sitting there utilizing it and getting it out of yourself.
I love that term, sour energy. I'm going to play with that. And I think there's a season. So I was an athlete. I don't know about you, but I was, three-sport athlete, and I love to compete. But at this season of my life, I'm not competing in the same way. Now it's contribution. And so if
Yes.
you're measuring it, based on other people's performance, that's one way. But for me, I measure this based on myself. And every day is different. And I am in my 40s. I am entering a different season as a woman, and I'm excited about it. But who I am now, I'm not comparing it to the athlete that I was in my teens and 20s. It's just not fair. Nor would I expect my 14 or 17-year-old self to be as, updated and mature as this version of me. Like you get to have it all, just
It's
not at the
weird when
same time.
when you said when you went through that phrase, you're like, I'm the oldest I've ever been, not I'm the youngest I've ever been.
Isn't
When
that
you said
strange?
that at first I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? But then a split second later, I'm like, oh yeah. And right now that resonates even more where it's like, yeah, right now you are the youngest you've ever been. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it now,
No.
but this is you can still design your life. You can still
Yes.
create forward. You can still make a difference in yourself. So I love that this is the youngest I've ever been. Just because I love the fact that the way you visualize this is the youngest I've ever been paints that picture that the path is forward. That
Yes.
you're the youngest you've ever been. Consider this the starting point. What are you going to design?
Yeah.
What are you going
I'll
to
never be
create?
this young ever again.
Mm,
And there's
yeah.
something really lovely about that because it is kind of that beginner's mindset. And yet I
Yes.
have 43 years of experiences and connections and learning and growth to tap.
Yeah.
And that there's something, I'm really proud of all of those iterations of me, especially the ones that didn't quit, especially the ones that were in really scary seasons and she didn't quit. I have
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of respect and admiration and appreciation for those previous versions. And now I have the history and the foresight to go, okay, what does 50-year-old Heidi want 43-year-old Heidi to know? What would and she's the one who's like, you need to lift. You need to eat in a way that feels really intentional. Like this season's no joke for me. I'm not having children anymore. We've got
Yeah.
3 kids. We're headed into like perimenopause land. This is a whole new show. And what does
Yeah.
50-year-old Heidi need to know? Or what need this version of me to know? And I listen to her. She's kick-ass too.
How old are your kids, Heidi?
My oldest is going to be 15 here, and then
Okay.
we've got a 13 and a 10-year-old. So we're in a
Okay.
really cool season. Like just they're
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
We
I
have a,
remember being each of their ages.
oh yeah, vividly, vividly. My 8-year-old, when he gets emotional about stuff, when he gets upset about stuff, when he gets happy about stuff, when he gets angry about stuff, I remember clearly being his age, what,
Yes.
second or third grade. So I remember I put myself in his shoes. But yeah, we have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 15-month-old.
Yeah, you're in a whole
Um,
different season.
I know. I
Yeah.
know. So another reason,
Don't make any
not,
major decisions when you're tired. That's my biggest
yeah,
piece of
yeah.
advice.
It's all good though. I mean, it's good because they've kept me more active than I was before them.
Understood.
And
Yeah,
and
same.
even though I had them later than I had ever anticipated, to me that's good because it keeps me moving even more than I had before. It keeps me active. And
You
and
and
that's
Mike
another
are pretty
reason.
similar with the age that you were when you had kids. Because I'm 7 years younger than Mike. And so I'm looking at the
Okay.
split. So,
Yeah.
and I mean, he's super active. He's a fit dude. And
Oh, he was
I
a
think
personal trainer too, right? At
he
some
was,
point?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
And
okay.
he still
I
competes.
I my friend was not.
Well, I mean, he was a total gym rat, but he competes. There's this thing called the State Games of America. You should look into it. It's super interesting. He and Noah, my oldest, competed together last year, and I mean, the we went to the State Games of America. The youngest competitor was like 4, and I think the oldest competitor was in their 80s.
That's
And it was
cool.
really fascinating to watch athletes of all age groups. You're like, oh, you don't have to be done after high school or college or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But kids, man, that's
Knock on
nothing
wood,
like it.
though. Knock on wood, this generation is different than our parents'
Oh,
generation. I don't
100.
know if you've seen online these comparisons of what people used to look like at our age
The
versus
Golden
now.
Girls, yeah,
Yeah.
I know. One of my
So
favorite shows, by the way.
yeah. So it's gonna be interesting because we have like more tools than they did at their time with like connections like this. We're
Yeah.
more cognizant of our health. We're more cognizant of our mental health.
Yep.
So it's going to be amazing, God willing, we live a long, fruitful life to see what we come up with. And again, that's why that study for me is so believable that the most productive generations for you are like 60s and
I
70s.
love it.
I think by the time we get to that, yeah, look it up. I got to
I
look it up
will.
myself, but it's not surprising, especially our generation moving up towards that age. I can only imagine what that's going to look like, just
And then the
because we are
ripple
so
effect of what we get
self-aware
to
and
teach from
cognizant.
there. Like
Yeah,
what
exactly.
my kids coming up, the emotional intelligence that my children have, the ability to communicate when something doesn't feel right, they already know. Like, oh, anxious feelings means this, depression feelings means this. When was the
Hmm.
last time I ate? When was the last time? I mean, right now it's summer and they have not slept in their beds. I don't think in the last month. They just all sleep. They camp out in the family room together, which I love. It's darling. But
Yeah.
it's like, did you brush your teeth this week? Like,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
they are so emotionally intelligent and we are collaborating. We have our family values. We have the way that we interact dialed in. It's amazing.
Yeah. That is the other amazing part of parenthood is just being able to, from our parents' generations to us to them, how different that looks.
Yep.
We're more aware again all the health issues, the mental health issues, so we can have different kinds of conversations with them that I think prepares them a little more than school did for us.
Well, and I
Most of
think
our
even
education was school.
truly and what not to do, right?
Mm. Oh yeah.
School and our peers. But I think back to like when I was going through my depression diagnosis, like the internet didn't exist. There wasn't, you didn't Google it. So the fact that I even got help was a miracle in my mind. But then, in my 20s, that's when you could start Googling, like, what are other people doing? We just have the benefit of other people's,
Yes,
I mean, the benefit and
perspective,
the downfall.
experiences. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Hmm.
Everything is a double-edged sword.
I know.
Everything.
I
I
know.
was talking to somebody, or Nancy Berger, I just posted
Hmm.
her episode last week or this week, and we talked about childhood trauma,
Mm,
and how the most of our limiting beliefs obviously stem from those experiences, but at
of
the same
course.
time the wonder, the awe, the curiosity of childhood
Hmm.
is what can also offset the all
Impact.
the other the toxic things that we take out of childhood. So
Yeah.
it's like everything is that double-edged sword. It's like everything has to be almost in moderation and balance. But anyway, I know we've talked about leadership, Heidi. So, what does leadership mean to you? How
Mm.
would you briefly summarize or define leadership? And then, what does great leadership look like to you as well?
I really believe that we are all born leaders. Like I believe that like my name is Heidi and I leadership for me is not necessarily the person who's first. That doesn't resonate with me anymore. That's the culture I was brought up in.
Hmm.
But whoever was first was usually the loudest, was usually a white boy from when I was a kid. That was like, they would raise their hands first. They were the loudest, they were the most active. And yet, what I have learned over the course of my lifetime is that leadership comes in lots of different ways. And leadership for me is about my relationship with myself. How do I become the leader of my own life? And how do I connect with the leadership of other people and learn the skills and tools to behold and have reverence for all styles of leadership? So Mike and I have very different leadership styles. I am absolutely a more masculine energy when it comes to like, let's go. I want to be first. I want to be in the front of the room. I got a lot of ideas. Mike is very much an observer.
Mm.
Even when you first meet him, I mean, you guys had a unique experience, but when you first meet Mike, he's going to watch. I'm going to talk for an hour. He's going to talk for 30 seconds, and we're probably going to say the same thing. And we both have value in a room. But my reminder is to listen, and his reminder is to contribute. And so it really is for me about developing the leader in their own style. So, to your point, when you're talking about the platinum rule or platinum networking, treating others the way they want to be treated, I absolutely fundamentally applies to leaders. And so, part of the leadership development that we're doing is strengths based, it's equity based, and it's leader centered because I know when you're fine, your community benefits. I know when I'm fine, my community benefits. So the first leader I'm always taking care of is me. And then what we're doing in the leadership development space is how do you naturally lead? And how can we create room at the table for all styles of leadership?
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you. Um, so, let's jump into the book, Heidi. Can you
Hmm.
introduce the book and how you came across it?
So the book, I actually have my copy here, and it's all, it's got all the
Tabbed up.
tabs and I found this book, gosh, 15 years ago. This was pre kids, pre business, but I've always had a fascination with money. So the book is called The Energy of Money by Maria Nemeth. And I don't even remember, well, it's probably in the front cover. It was in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I did my undergrad, and
Okay.
Barnes and Noble. And I just have always loved money. I was a saver. I think you can see my little bear bank is right on a shelf down here. So that's my
Yeah.
very first bank. Still has cash in it. Don't come here and take it. But I love to save. I love to be very intentional with money. And yet I grew up with, limiting beliefs around money. There was never enough. Don't ask for too much, some of these old stories. And so it was like, yeah, I can learn how to handle money, but there's got to be something more. So the energy of money, this book has been life changing for me. And one of the chapters I actually teach in my inner circle. And Maria talks about the standards of integrity. And your standards of integrity, I love the etymology of words. So standard is actually, if you break it down, it means a banner. Standard is a military term. I didn't know that. but it means a banner.
Hmm.
And integrity means wholeness. So I was like, ooh, a banner of wholeness. If someone was going to come and visit me and I had my banner of wholeness, what would it say? How would they know it's me? So she takes you through this whole exercise, and there's a twist at the end that I'm not going to ruin. And I was gobsmacked. And it takes a lot for me to be surprised because, to your point, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of similar language when it comes to some of these spaces. But this book turned it on its head. It was like, no way. So I make all of my decisions and I bump them up against my banner of wholeness. And it's similar to values work, but I tend to think of values as like integrity with like a whale on it, hanging in a bank. That values are one thing. Standards of wholeness. How do I recognize myself as a whole person and then make financial decisions from there? That was a game changer for me.
Yeah, I like that only because I don't think we really take time to really consider step back and look at the big picture of who we are. Most
Mhm.
of us are in reactive mode, just trying to get through life, through work, through family, whatever it may be. So I mean, I'm always saying that take a step back, but I love that standard of wholeness. Like, what is it
Mhm.
that goes into it? What is it that makes your big picture of who you are?
This is foundational work for me. And so that's a lot of the leadership work that we do. It's not about how can you do more of what's already not working or burning you out.
Yeah.
How can you get
Yes.
more efficient at being uncomfortable? It really is like, let's do this inner leadership. And so this is one of the tenets of what we teach. And she's still living. She's a wonderful speaker. I give her full credit for the standards of integrity work that I do because it's fun to teach this lesson. It's so fun. It's always shocking at the end, which I love.
What are some of the reactions that you get? What's some of the feedback that you get based on that one particular piece?
So what I love is that everybody in my community knows their standards. And so we can speak to that. So all of the coaching that happens like inside of the consulting, or I roll this out, or excuse me, all of what happens in the coaching, now
Mhm.
I've rolled it out into the consulting, is they go, "Oh, I know who I am. I have a greater understanding, and here's the key that we talk about a lot inside of When You Lead. Now I have the language. And when you know yourself, you can advocate for yourself. When you know yourself, the platinum rule is so much more obvious to do because you're like, oh, if I know this is how I want to be treated, I'm actually curious how they want to be treated.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah,
knowing each other's standards of integrity, this also winds back to disappointment because you cannot expect that other people are going to have your standards. There's a difference between standards and
absolutely.
expectations.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about these are your standards and you absolutely do not get to give them to someone else to live up to. These are for you.
That's
And
a
your
very good
expectations
point.
matter, but no one has to live up to those. That's between you and you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Um,
There's usually surprise and relief to answer your question.
okay, okay. Uh, yeah, but I like that. Your expectations, you got to meet in the middle somewhere.
Mhm.
God, there's so much that goes into
Create that
this.
win-win, right?
Yeah, but I think so many people lack that confidence. Maybe I'm not using the right language. Lack that confidence where, again, um, where if something doesn't play out, they're not tied to that result. They know themselves enough. They're stable enough in understanding who they are. Where if
Yes.
something doesn't pan out, they're just like, okay, it didn't work out. Uh, don't hang out with this person anymore, or talk to them a little more about what we could have done, or just they're great, but not for this particular thing, or what did I not convey correctly?
Mhm.
Um, but there's something that even when I work with students, there's something about learning what confidence is, knowing who you are, knowing where you stand, whatever vernacular you want to use, whether it's standards or values, whatever words, because I think a
Mhm.
lot of people get tripped up on the words, but
Mhm.
knowing what you stand and knowing yourself well enough that you can be shakable, but you're not going to be completely disrupted by something not working out. Um, yeah, it's just so much that can go into that conversation.
One of the methods or one of the tenets of the lead method is, and it's something that I teach to everybody who comes into contact with me, the D of the lead method is detachment.
Yes, that's
There
another word that's come up so often on here. Yes.
And that's a
Absolutely.
physiology. It's one thing to say you need to detach from this. It's another thing for people to go, yeah, but how?
Yes.
And that is about your body. That is about the stories that you're telling. And the other D of the lead method is to make decisions. Leaders make decisions. That's one of my core definitions of being a leader is you have to make decisions. You can't just live in philosophy. Although I tried for a
Yes.
long time.
Theory is great and all that, but yeah,
But you
it's
got to
the actions,
experiment.
the execution, the experimentation.
Yep.
But yeah, detachment is such a great one.
And it
Um,
really does matter. And it doesn't mean that you don't care.
exactly. That's a great point to make.
It
The
means that you have an understanding of I have done what I'm going to do for this, and there are parts of it that I'm not in control of.
mm,
And that's okay.
exactly.
Our kids have gone to a Montessori elementary school, and they are a virtues based school. And one of the virtues that they were taught was detachment. And I remember when Noah came home and
Amazing.
he was like, yeah, we're learning about detachment. I was like, what the hell is going what?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
they wanted them to understand that who you are is more than just who you are when things are going well. Who are you when it's not going well? And can
Yeah.
you reserve some energy when it's not going well? Matters.
Yeah. I think the first time I really started thinking about that was when I read the Four Agreements.
Yes.
And the fourth
Solid book.
agreement is always do your best. And it's amazing because it's such a simple conversation to have. Like, and I don't mean simple that it's easy, but you can lay it out. Like he writes the book as if it's for a child. Like it's
Yes.
very plain
Accessible.
language,
Yep.
very accessible. And and he walks you through that final agreement in that book, that point
Mm-hmm.
because it's up here. Always do your best. And I think that's when I really got that idea of detachment. Was like, if you did your best, what else can you do? Like you poured into it, you did your due diligence. Now I'm using like common language. You did your due
Yep.
diligence, you studied whatever it was. If it didn't work out, how can you be disappointed with yourself?
Right.
There's that word disappointment.
Yeah, I heard
You
it.
can rework things, you can go back and try again, but don't get so lost in the result when you should really look back at how you've done and you were prepared as possible. So that
And
to
I
me is
think
one that
that
really, really sunk in.
and having your best be on a continuum. So for me, my best is variable. And I read something recently that was like if you have 30% and you give 30%, you gave 100%. And I know for me, especially juggling lots of roles, where it's like my best is variable.
Hmm.
So there are days where I can show up and bang it out and I can go from 5 a.m. to 12, a.m. and I'm just like on a roll and in flow. And there are other days where it's like if I have to microwave something, it's not happening.
Yeah.
So letting there be variation to my best and knowing that it's like a season. Not every day is June 21st in the Midwest, right? You get a lot of
Yeah.
freaking February here too. And can you have reverence for yourself? Can you tend to yourself? Can you be okay when your best is variable? And that's where, for me, detachment comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that. I read that book maybe 6 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but then really refined my thinking on detachment in the last year and a half
Mm-hmm.
since this podcast. Um, Talking to a guest about, if we're getting up to speak in front of somebody, we prepare and we get out there,
Right.
we do it. And then when it's over, yes, we want accolades. Why not?
Sure.
Respect, of course. More business, great. Connection, amazing. But if it didn't resonate, we did what we could. We respected the craft. We did our due diligence. We prepared as
Mm-hmm.
much as possible. It came up in another episode when we talked about Coach John Wooden, and he said, "Listen," and his focus was the practice
Yes.
because practice is that's where I need you. If you do your practice, if we do what we're supposed to in practice from start to finish, from lacing up our shoes to whatever drills, when we
Mm-hmm.
get to the game, it doesn't matter because we've done the work that needs to be done. We hope obviously the score goes in our favor, but that I've come to respect that, and it's given me what I've learned because of detachment is not so much about loss of fulfillment, but more gain of peace.
Mm.
That
And I
even if I
think that
worked
it's
hard and it didn't work out, I'm not disappointed. I'm at peace because I did the best I could.
And I think then it takes the pressure off of like always having to have a peak experience. And I love peak experiences, don't get
Oh
me wrong.
yeah,
I
absolutely,
that's fun
absolutely.
for me. But there's something about, and my daughter Ivy just literally had her first dance audition yesterday. And she went through this whole summer class and she said, Mama, what should I wear? This was on day one. And I said, well, if you're going to get into a company, what do they wear in a company? And she said, tights, a leotard, and you pull your hair back. I'm like, if it were me, that's how I would show up day one. I'm already in the company. I'm going to do what I need to do. And then by the time you get to the audition, this is just, it's a well worn path. But she said,
Mm.
I don't want to stand out. I don't want, people to think a certain way about me if I show up in tights and a leotard. And what was super interesting is she still did it. She came out. I did not know what she was going to wear to that first dance class. And she came out and she was wearing it. And secretly inside, I'm like, yeah, girl, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Every class, more and more girls started wearing tights and a leotard and pulling their hair back. And she had her audition yesterday and she nailed it. She doesn't know this yet, but I just got the email that she got into her company.
Awesome.
But when we were driving to her class yesterday, I said, how are you feeling? And she said, I'm nervous, but this is just like any other rehearsal because I'm already wearing what I was going to wear
Mm.
if I got into a company and I've done exactly what I was taught to do. I practice in between time, and so I'm okay. And she's
Awesome.
10 years old.
That's
I'm
those
just
are huge
inspired by it.
lessons at that point. Huge lessons.
It's exciting. And she got in. She doesn't know yet. I get to go tell her when we're done.
That's
It's fun.
amazing. Um, yeah, but so much there about fulfillment, what fulfillment is, peace. Um,
And
that's
process.
that's what I work. That's what I find myself working towards more. Like it used to be success, whatever success may look like. Then it was about fulfillment. Now it's just peace.
Mm,
Now it's because there is so much going on in my life in this season, as you've said,
yeah.
that just okay, a peaceful moment is just everything.
Yes. And that will shift. Your
Yeah.
youngest at 15 months, it's a piece is a lot to expect, I think, at that season.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's a gem. She's a gem. The
Yes.
boys, not so much,
But
but
there's
compared to
different
her brothers,
expectations, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
you're at a season still where there's a lot of need from you. There's a lot of
yeah,
delivery that happens. I'm in a season now where like they might be awake, they might not. We're going on noon here in the summer and they might be up. They might have
yep.
eaten.
No, no, no.
It's different now
No,
that he
and
rides everywhere.
I've told people that maybe had one child and they're like, "How do you do it with three?" I'm like, same word you've been using this whole hour, Heidi, about the seasons.
Yeah.
Like, the oldest is in the season where I can have him help out with the younger
Yes.
two. The second one's in the season where I can help ask him to get a diaper for me for his sister. Like they're just going through these different phases or seasons and it just
Mm-hmm.
makes it more manageable. So it's not I think when you say three kids, there is a lot of energy there, but I think people just picture like three infants that you're always on.
Right.
But there is that flexibility.
When I always double it where it's like, okay, what if I had six kids? Because some people do. It's
Yeah.
like, well, piece of cake. I can handle three. I'm not doing
Yeah.
six, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes you gotta think that way too sometimes. Give yourself a break.
Heidi, so when it comes to the book, what is it? How is it laid out? What's the journey
Hmm.
that the author takes you on? What are some of the chapter titles to kind of give a sense of what
Yeah.
that path looks like?
So one of my favorite chapters, I've already talked to you about the standards of integrity. That's kind of in the middle. I'm trying to, the other thing I really wanted to highlight, she talks about trouble at the border. So one of the other reasons I loved this book was it does have a lot of philosophy. It does do a lot of metaphysics, and I'm a total philosophy nerd when it comes to metaphysics. And she talks about these ideas that live in the metaphysical world, in like the idea space, and you're literally making them physical. And there is a border between idea and action, idea and the concrete thing happening. And it resonated with me. This is at the very beginning of the book because it was like, yeah, I get super amped in the idea phase. I get super amped in the innovation and like all the ideas, let's do it all. But it's so ethereal there. The energy is
Mm.
very vast. When for something to come into form, it's a denser energy. You and I are a denser energy. We're collected. And the trouble at the border is, I think, where I get to help leaders perform. So that's at the beginning of the book. It's like this hero's journey. And then there's very, very practical tools as you're moving through it. She's going to have you go through, your money story, how to rewrite it, some of the things that we've done before. But for me, the trouble at the border, that's where I think my leadership gifts lie, is what are you going to do when it sucks? That's a book title I'm working on. Who are you when it sucks? Because so many of us are awesome when it's awesome, but who are you when it's taking longer? Who are you when someone disappoints you? Who are you when you're taking this big idea and bringing it to fruition? Are you willing to get help at the border? Are you willing to learn new skills at the border? Are you willing to be more patient than you've ever been? Are you willing to work harder than you've ever worked? So it's a hero's journey, and then it's supported with tools and techniques.
Okay. Okay. So what are some of the titles as she goes through the book?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what they are right here. My favorite was the border. So she talks about the hero's purpose, identifying the inner blocks to progress, clearing the path, and staying the course. So it really is. I teach about labyrinths. Are you familiar with labyrinths?
I mean, I know what
Sort
they are.
of.
I don't know if you have like a deeper
Well, basically,
meaning
it's
to
like a
what they may
maze where
be.
you can't get lost, right? Like you
Yeah,
start
yeah.
at the beginning, you go to the middle, and you walk back out. It's a
Hmm.
meditative process. It's also it's something that I teach is called labyrinth learning, where there's different phases, and so each of these phases really resonates with me on a labyrinth level. But when you're clearing the path, that I think is it resonates with leadership in such a different way because you have to greet the versions of you that you might be trying to avoid.
Okay.
And so that's where anxious feelings, that's where depression feelings, that's where if you're pissed off comes in. It's like you still have to tend to that. You still have to clear some of those things out in order for your big idea to come to fruition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just always pictured as if you're fighting those sensations, that energy takes away from the energy that you would use to create something, use to bring something to life.
And there's
Um,
usually something within that gets to be liberated. The thing that you're avoiding
yeah,
is the way. So if you're avoiding anxious feelings are the way. If you are avoiding firing someone is the way. If you're avoiding having that conversation is the way. And this book really supports that. And I love that there's an energetic component. I also love that it's a book about money that's written by a woman. That's hard to find.
yeah, but it's amazing how it is a book about money, but nothing that you really talked about just now touches on that, which is
Exactly.
it's unique,
And
because
there's validity to that because so much of how we interact with money is we think logical. And it's just
yes,
so
yes,
not. Like this
yes,
is can you be taught to invest? Can you be taught how to handle your cash flow? Can you be taught how to generate revenue? Of course. But if you do not have like foundational work, it doesn't matter. It's the same with leadership. You can be taught to be more efficient. You can taught how to hire people. If you don't know what your values are, if you don't know what's driving the bus, including, you know, the good and the not so good or the shadow and the light, it doesn't matter. Tools, if you don't have the physiology or the philosophy, it's just more information. It's more
yeah, I
oppressive.
love that. And I love how the book applies to leadership, to life. It's amazing. I just had a conversation with somebody this morning about her possibly coming on the series,
Hmm.
and she said, "Ah, but the book that I'm thinking of is like academic, and it's this book," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I mean, to me, just from what you're telling me, from what I know of you, I just met her on that phone call. It seems like all those kind of processes, the technical, you can use in other areas.
Yes.
Like a lot of the
Translates.
things a lot of it translates. A lot of stuff that I've learned in my leadership class, I use in my personal life. Everything kind of transfers from one to the next. So I like the fact that it's a money book, but those are lessons that you can use in leadership, in your personal life about how to look at it, that it's not just what you see in front of you, but that there's more depth there.
And you could take this method and apply it to any area. And like you've seen those wheels of life where it's relationships and money and
Yes.
career and family.
Yeah.
This is it's foundational and it just happens to be about money.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so Heidi, getting close to wrapping up, what are you
Yeah.
up to these days? What is it you might want to share with this audience? Anything that I might have missed? Anything at all?
Oh man, I think we could do, like we've said, 5.5 part series. I'm just really grateful for this connection. I want to call forward how unlikely it was that we met, how unlikely that it was that were in the same book and had this experience. So I like to point out the magic of that and how we were not directly responsible, but we did participate. We took opportunities as they came. I didn't even know you existed until, 6 months ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's
It's so
crazy.
cool. So I just want to acknowledge that word coincidence, which we think of as happenstance, but really it's 2 points coinciding. And
Hmm.
our points coinciding is highly unlikely. And so I just want to say thank you for being a part of, this journey for me and having our points coincide. And I'm very curious to see what will happen. And so I want to name that first
Yeah. I
because it's
completely
crazy.
agree. I completely agree. You can be connected to people on LinkedIn and here and there, but there's just something about meeting the right kind of people that they kind of just hold up that mirror to you about that, to bring out that energy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
To bring out that brilliance out of each other. You, Mike, it's been amazing to having met you, and then just finding that fire that you both have. Uh, yeah, I could talk to you guys all day about, what we hope for the world, how we want to work, how we want to work together. But I'm completely serious about some kind of 2, 3 part series on
Cool.
just something, whatever topic, just
We should
because,
do the three of us. I think that would be
oh,
fun.
absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
about like what it take leadership inside of families, leadership inside of couples, because Mike and I really do
Yeah.
lead very differently, and
Yeah.
we both identify with that term leader. So I would love to do that. I think it would be an interesting episode for sure.
Yeah.
And
No,
stay
well,
tuned. We're going to drop that disappointment class. We're going to be dropping the podcast. The When You Lead community is on its way. As of this recording, we're in August, but by September, there's a whole library of opportunity and ways to collaborate and truly be supportive
yeah,
of individual leadership styles. I'm so proud of the work that we're doing. I cannot wait to share it. It's on its way.
that's amazing. Yeah, you guys should be proud.
Thank
What
you.
Heidi, what is the format of the podcast? Like what is it you're trying to delve into in each of the episodes, or what does that look like? What does the conversation look like?
So the first season really is a foundational season. And so what I've done is I've taken one version of outdated leadership and then I've updated it.
Okay.
So every episode is about a philosophy, a physiology, and a strategy. That's really what we're doing. And it's kind of a contrarian tagline, but it's like, so you can actually lead like a grown up. Like, come on, man. This is not your
Yeah.
parents' leadership model.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not your grandparents' leadership model. So it really is it's designed to give you a tool for each episode. So the first 7 episodes are me, and it's foundational. We're looking at what we want for season 2. That will more than likely be interviews with other leaders. And we'd like to correlate that with our community where we collaborate on the podcast and then you come in as a guest expert inside of our community. So we're working on how can we really serve in a multitude of ways. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. No, I'm looking forward to that. I think
Thank you.
that kind of twist of just, it's amazing that we still have to fight to get rid of the old school way of thinking of what leadership is, but it's
Yeah.
amazing how many people really are stuck in, leadership speaks and a leader speaks and everybody listens.
And
Um,
they don't have another way to do it. So they might know
yeah.
that it isn't right, but they don't have another option. So this podcast is really my
Mm,
offering to that of like, this is what outdated leadership looks like. This is what updated leadership looks like. Here's the language and here's how to do it. So it really is it's a podcast of service. And every
yeah, I
episode's
love
about
that.
20-ish minutes,
Okay.
super digestible, very actionable. I'm really proud. I'm like chomping. I can't wait for it to go. But
No, and that's
we're
good
being
too,
patient.
because I mean, not everybody's in this space, or the or has the ability to get a coach, or to get, be
Exactly.
part of group coaching. You'd be surprised what happens when you listen to a conversation or you listen to a podcast of somebody that's in a different space than you're used to.
Yes.
Uh, I would implore anybody, even before hearing what it is, to take a listen when it does come out, because you'd be surprised. Somebody can put something in such a language that resonates with you, or puts it in such a way that you never thought of before. It can wake you up just hearing these different ideas in somebody's voice. Books are amazing. Obviously, I love books, but there's something about hearing somebody that's passionate about it share it
Yes.
with you in such a way.
And I'm amped in this podcast. Like I get
I can
pretty animated.
imagine. I can imagine animated. Um, no, so thank you, Heidi, so much for sitting down with me for this conversation. I
Thank you.
appreciate it very much. And I really, invitations open to collaborate on any kind of podcast or conversation.
I'm in.
Consider me a resource. Absolutely. Both you and Mike.
We would love
Um,
to have you as a guest expert in the community. Absolutely come on the podcast when we're starting season 2.
just say the
We're
word.
excited. Yeah, you are on the top of the list of who we want to collaborate with. So it's been a
Just say
pleasure.
the word. I'm always down for a great conversation.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you,
the
John.
book that Heidi covered in this episode was The Energy of Money, A Spiritual Guide to Financial and Personal Freedom by Maria Nemeth.
Nemeth, yep.
Nemeth. And then the book that she and I were co-authors on with what 20 other people was The
Yep.
Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Successful Soul Professional, 22 Powerful Growth Strategies for Upleveling Your Soul Aligned Business. Heidi, did you want to tell people just briefly what your chapter title was?
So it's blow the lid, basically. I teach my lid method. So it's how to leverage your anxiety for clarity in your business. So it's so much of what we
Ooh,
talked about.
yep.
I give you an acronymed method, but it really is how do you use your anxious feelings to your advantage?
That's
So,
powerful stuff. And then mine was chapter 11, Platinum Networking, designing a unique experience for others in a world of disconnection. Again, my platinum networking thinking is really going above and beyond when you're networking. It's not just about taking business for yourself. The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The
yep.
platinum rule is do unto them as they would have them do unto you. It's all about learning to really get to understand what it is that they need. So I treat everybody in my network, colleagues, guests, as if they were my client. And in the chapter, I go through how I look at it. And I didn't really think about where this came from until I started thinking about my chapter. And it comes from my parents, working with them, blue collar workers, immigrants. So there's a lot of lessons that I pick up from them. And again, that's a better education than I got in school. No offense to the universities, but they were real life lessons, and it really does impact people in my network. So check out the book, Heidi's chapter, my chapter, all the other chapters. Again, Heidi, thank you for this time.
Thank you so much, John. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. And if there's anything that I might have missed, we're always limited on time, although we went kind of long today, which I love. We just went down these rabbit holes. Please reach out. Let me know. I'll reach out to Heidi, see if there are any questions that you have that she can respond to and provide some feedback on. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.